Greetings from Castle Goring from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. I am filming this today, the 31st of August, which is exactly 25 years since Diana, Princess of Wales, died. And basically, the theme today is going to be Diana and her life, the effect she had on others, and her death, insofar as it is of interest to you, the viewers, who have sent in questions. So, without further ado, I think I will plunge right in. Janine says, Dear Lady C, I love the jewels you are wearing today. Well, since you haven't seen these, I think you must have meant the ones I was wearing the last time. Thank you very much, my dear. How do you think Princess Diana would feel about the way M is treating the royals and how she is phasing H out? Do you think H thinks about it? And how, big block capitals, does he not see how people around the world, big block capitals, feel about M? I mean, we are not talking one or two family members. We are talking the whole world and now a country. Exclamation marks followed by several question marks. My eyes are popping out of my head and cannot even roll. And I am left speechless when I hear the levels of self-importance, disrespect, and narcissism that just keep rising. Well, before I answer the question, however, I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to be mischievous. You see those flowers behind me? If Harry and Meghan ever knew who sent them to me, they would have a nervous breakdown. Poor Megsy Baby and H. They would absolutely be frothing at the mouth. Aren't they wonderful? You can only get a little glimpse of them, but they are wonderfully, wonderfully beautiful. Every sort of rose, every colour rose, just densely packed in the most gorgeous arrangement. So, having stirred the pot a little bit, after all, Megsy Baby isn't the only one who has a ladle and can stir. So, to answer the question, well, you only need to compare the photographs of Diana and that imitation, that poor imitation called Meghan, to see that it's the difference between a fine racehorse and a broken down donkey. The Patrick de Marchelier photograph that they have tried to evoke shows a very attractive woman who, for all her failings, has warmth, has kindness, has generosity of spirit. Yes, Diana wasn't perfect. Yes, she made huge mistakes. Yes, by the time that photograph was taken, Diana was a pariah within established circles on this side of the Atlantic. But Diana never tried to damage the monarchy. She was very proud of the fact that her son, William, was going to be king. She had even tried off the lies that Martin Bashir had told her, thinking that the Queen was going to abdicate. She had even tried to get herself appointed regent by having Charles out of the line of succession and having William leapfrog over Charles. I mean, unrealistic ambitions as displayed by Meghan and Harry do link up, I have to say, rather sadly, with a precedent from the past. But you know, while they had some failings in common, because Diana could be extremely self-important, she could be extremely disrespectful of people's rights when it was in her interest to mow them down. She could be pretty narcissistic at times. She wasn't a narcissist, really. Her failings were failings born of true insecurity as a result of her parents' divorce and the way her father had mistreated her mother with the assistance of her grandmother Ruth Fermoy. Sorry. Diana had genuine bugbears. Yes, she was spoiled by her parents. Yes, there are parallels with Meghan being spoiled and Harry being spoiled. But she had genuine bugbears. Harry has some bugbears that are genuine. Meghan, not unless you consider being ashamed of being mixed race and a bugbear. And that, I would respectfully submit, is certainly not the failing of her father or people in her upbringing generally. And we are not focusing on Meghan, so we are not going to pursue that line of thinking further. At the time of her death, Diana had rarely blotted her copy with the establishment. Between 1992 and 1995, the Andrew Morton book, followed by the Martin Bashir interview, she was regarded as a traitor by many establishment figures. And I'm afraid there was never going to be any way back into absolute acceptance or universal approbation. To a lot of establishment figures, Diana's treachery, which is what they regarded it as being, was something that was an integral part of her character and was therefore rendering her thereafter unacceptable. We also need to realize that Diana, after the Martin Bashir interview, and all doors were slammed in her face. Before that, because people weren't 100% sure that she had colluded with the Morton book, and nobody knew that she'd colluded with my book, and that I'd pulled the plug on her, because I knew that what she was saying about the Prince of Wales was untrue and unfair. I don't know that Morton ever thought or cared about whether what she said was untrue or unfair. I don't think he had access to the people or the information that I did, and so we let him off the hook. But she certainly knew that a lot of it was untrue and unfair. And because a lot of people couldn't nail her by proving that she had actually taken part in it. And she denied having taken part in it until after her death, when Morton revealed that she had. She sort of got a bit of a pass until the Bashir interview, and thereafter the doors were firmly shut, and she started to mend fences in the last 18 months of her life, maybe 15 months of her life would be more accurate, to mend the fences and rebuild her level of acceptability, which to an extent she succeeded in doing, but only in a limited way. So she was by then looking abroad, looking to America. And we need to remember that at the time of her death, she had plans well laid. It's all there in my book, The Real Diana, and it's been proven by other people as well, that she had plans well laid to move to California. She had encouraged Dodi to buy Julie Andrews' house, which Mohammed Fayed was buying for them. He was also going to be setting her up in an international charity, which would doubtless have been called the Diana Princess of Wales International Charity. And Mohammed Fayed had been a big supporter of charities for much of his life. This is something very few people know. But he was a huge contributor to charities and did a lot of charity work himself. So I just say that for what it's worth. So that was dovetailing neatly, but she was also, by moving to California and moving her base of operations to California, she would also have had to leave William and Harry, who at the time of her death, at the time of her burial, let's put it that way, were 13 and 15. Now, Diana was always going on and on about how her mother had abandoned her, when her mother did no such thing. Her father is the one who forced her the issue and got her mother twice deprived of custody of the children. So Diana was very unfair when she was saying that her mother had abandoned her. She knew her mother hadn't, but it played better because Diana also liked sympathy. There are parallels in the Meghan and Harry situation and the Diana situation, which make for very uncomfortable viewing, let's put it that way. But Diana had a lot of virtues, which neither Meghan nor Harry will so far. Well, Harry used to display some of them, but Meghan has never had them. Diana had genuine warmth, genuine kindness, genuine affection. She also had the opposite, but we're sticking with what she had that was positive at the moment. And to answer the question in terms of Harry and Meghan, how does Harry not see what the world thinks? Harry, whether he sees it or not, he doesn't care. Meghan can convince him that the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. And he's perfectly happy to go along with it as long as he is getting his fix. Fabulous Newt says, surely this puts to rest the idea the royals did away with Diana. If they could assassinate Diana on a hectic night in Paris, where they weren't scheduled to be, they obviously being Dan and Dodi, surely they, meaning the royal family, could have popped off Mimi as she munches her Cheetos, sat on her beige couch in her beige fake stone house while scrolling obsessed through social media comments about her great, wonderfully self-fullness. You're absolutely right in terms of the fact that the whole Meghan saga proves without the shadow of a doubt that all of those ridiculous stories about the royals bumping off Diana were as farcical as I have always said they were. Because Meghan has proven, and Harry, it has to be said, have proven to be a far more dangerous proposition and far more damaging than Diana. And Diana was pretty damaging. The fact of the matter is, there is no way Diana's death was anything but a tragic accident. There were maybe 20 or 30 different routes between the Ritz Hotel and Dodi's apartment. Nobody knew which one of those routes the car was going to take. Evidently, it is possible that even the participants, the very passengers in the car, didn't know the route until they were in the car. Are we to believe that hitmen were posted on a variety of routes? Also, had Diana been wearing a seatbelt, she'd have survived. There was no conspiracy, and the royal family does not go around bumping off inconvenient people. Some might say, well, Henry VIII, please come back. But Henry VIII is firmly on the other side, and those who have followed him are not playing that game. Sorry. Gillian Bennett says, Lady C, what do you think Harry's mother would have done about Meghan, both before and after the wedding? Grabbed Harry and boxed his ears? As usual, I thoroughly enjoy you. Kind regards. Thank you, Gillian Bennett. I think Diana, who was a very canny, would have seen through Meghan from the word go, but I don't think that Meghan would have had a look-in had Diana lived. I think Meghan's toehold was in part a result of Diana's death. I think had she lived, everything would have been entirely different and there would have been no Meghan whatsoever. There might have been someone else equally inappropriate, if such a thing is possible, but I don't think it would have been Meghan. However, Diana would not have objected on the grounds of race, because Diana had a series of exotic lovers from foreign climes, more than you realize. But Diana, in her own way, was quite snobbish. After the Barry Manicky affair, she never repeated that mistake. She never had another lover who wasn't socially acceptable. She learned from that mistake. All her lovers were socially acceptable. All. All had sophistication, civility, the good manners of the well-bred, and a degree of respect for the established world. Meghan has no respect for the established world. Meghan thinks like a pig at the trough, that if she just snouts her way through life, devouring everything she can, that is clever and elegant. And her idea of elegance is phony to the nth degree. It's very inelegant. The two exotic lovers that Diana had, that the public know about, were Hashnat Khan and Dodi Fayed. Dodi's mother Samira was Adnan Khashoggi's sister. The Khashoggis are a very rich and very grand and very well established Middle Eastern family. Dodi Fayed, who I have to tell you, I didn't know Dodi at all, but several of my friends knew him very well. And Dodi had beautiful manners, could be absolutely charming, exquisite, sweet, etc. And Hashnat Khan, I know some of his cousins. He is from a very well-established Pashtun family in Pakistan. He is a member of the Pakistani elite. He has evidently beautiful manners. He can fit in anywhere. Unlike Meghan, who fits in nowhere. So would Diana have disapproved? Yes, because Diana also hated women who not only tried to, but succeeded in eclipsing her. And Meghan is compulsive about eclipsing everybody. Ida says Diana was indeed, among other things, too needy for attention to have made a good wife to anybody other than the Muslim men she has been enamored with, for they would have been only too eager to use their money to land a trophy wife, such as she, as their utmost bragging rights to display. A white Christian aristocrat who is mother to the heir to the British throne itself. Well, Ida, I think you're partly right, but I think you're right for the wrong reasons. Middle Eastern women are brought up to be very apparently catering to their men. Their men are brought up to allow the wives to bask. Diana, had she married Dodi, that would have been a very good fit. I actually used to say she should have married Muhammad instead of Dodi because he was more interesting. But Dodi according to everybody who I know who knew him well, was very loving, and people who knew them as a couple thought that they were very well suited, because Dodie was an adorer and Diana liked being adored. Dodie's father had the money and Diana liked luxury. Diana loved the billionaire toys. She loved the yachts and the private planes. Harry and Meghan loved them too. Loads of people love them. Are you going to sell your soul for them? I don't think Diana was selling her soul for them, but I think she would have been very happy to have them. And to those of you who think that Dodie was just a holiday romance, he wasn't. She went to the priest to marry them. She told Lady Boca. She told Dodie's step-uncle, the Khashoggi step-uncle, and the Khashoggis hate Mohammed Fayed. They would have done anything to deprive him of the pleasure of saying that Diana and Dodie were going to get married, if it had been true that they were not going to get married. But it was true that they were going to get married. And so they, being honourable people, did not deprive him of that pleasure. The marriage with Hajnat Khan would have been a total disaster. He's a very dedicated doctor. He's a gentleman. He is a member of an elitist background. There is no way his family would have allowed that marriage, and both of them knew it. The marriage with Dodie, a completely different matter. Mohammed Fayed would have bankrolled the whole thing. He'd have bankrolled the charity. In fact, there was talk. It's all in my book, The Real Diana. There was talk of setting up an international charity that Mohammed Fayed would have paid for. And he has a sterling track record, incidentally, with supporting charities way above duty. He is a very interesting amalgam of pirate and charitable saint. People don't realize this, but it's true. She and Dodie were planning to move to LA. Mohammed Fayed was buying Julie Andrews' house for them to live in. They were going to be living in LA. Now, Diana would have had to leave her children behind. She said it. She said it to many people. And she was going to do it. Her life was moving on. To her, that was not going to be abandoning them. That was going to be her seeking a new life abroad. And she would see Harry and William during the holidays. And let us not forget the summer that Diana died. The boys only spent 2 weeks of that whole summer with her. They opted to be with their father's family and in the royal fold for the other 6 weeks or 7 weeks of their summer holidays. You see, the reality is a little bit more complex than people would like to believe. Carol Ashman says, I've just watched the 4 episodes of investigating Diana's death in Paris. In the second episode, a lady said that Mohammed Al Fayed would get his revenge for the death of his son Dodi, as he believed the royal family were responsible. Do you think he could be bankrolling Meghan? Obviously, this is just an opinion. There's no possibility of Mohammed Fayed bankrolling Harry and Meghan. Mohammed Fayed is very old. He is very infirm. I don't want to say more than that. I doubt very much that the public will ever see him, get a glimpse of him even, ever again, until they get a glimpse of his hearse. I don't want to say more than that. There is no possibility that he is bankrolling them. Insofar as the investigations into Diana's death are concerned, the whole thing is ludicrous. There have been many books, one of which was mine. There has been an inquest that took months and covered hundreds of witnesses. I spoke to all the main people. I spoke to the companies, Mercedes. Dr. Millet and I lectured together at Goldsmiths College the year after Diana's death. He's the person who discovered her body. The evidence is absolutely clear. And I don't know why there is still such a mystery. If people wish to follow the facts tell you what happened. Here are the facts, and here what happened in as brief a time as I can tell it. They left the Ritz Hotel. They were shaking off the paparazzi, who Diana had tipped off. It was a game. Look how popular I am. Look how famous I am. She was impressing Dodi as well, with how famous she was and how pursued she was. I spoke to several of the journalists whom she phoned the day of her death to tell them that she was going to be in Paris, where she was going to be, etc., etc. So you could say, if the paparazzi had anything to do with her death, she is the one who invited her killers in to the scene, if literally, as it turns out. Sadly, but literally. If you know Paris, they have very large roundabouts leading into the tunnels. And when I say roundabouts, I mean huge circles that are hundreds of yards or hundreds of feet. And they then lead into the tunnels, not like little English roundabouts, huge things with many lanes. And of course, in France, people drive on the right. The car, the Mercedes being driven by Henri Paul, shot out to go into the Pont d'Alma tunnel, which I know very well. I had a flat in Paris for about 10 years, so I know Paris really well. And the tunnel has a slight dip and isn't exactly straight, which is important because as the car was about to enter the tunnel, it clipped a white Fiat, which all the evidence suggests was being driven by, and it was an old white Fiat because the paint told you the age of the car, was owned by some poor person, most likely an illegal alien, who didn't want to stop because it would literally been a glancing graze. But the detritus from that glancing graze was on the ground and was retrieved. Paintwork from the white Fiat and a damaged headlight, if I recall correctly, from the Mercedes. It is at that point that the airbags activated. As Henri Paul is about to enter the tunnel, he clips the Fiat completely accidentally. Very slight clip, just a graze, but just enough for a little bit of damage. He enters the tunnel and he is blinded by the airbags. Now, I've been in an accident where the airbags deployed and they deactivate very quickly. We're speaking about seconds. What is going to take me minutes to describe all happened in maybe 3, 5, 7, 9, or 15 seconds. I don't know how long one thing that led to another, but we're speaking about seconds, certainly less than half a minute. Everything from the minute he clipped the white Fiat until he was killed at the point of impact with the 13th column, as indeed was Jody. He enters the tunnel and there are witnesses above the tunnel on the roadway and the pedestrian path, and in the tunnel there was a car. There was a North African couple in the car. Their evidence couldn't have been clearer. They saw the whole thing. They heard the car, the Mercedes, enter the tunnel roaring. The reason why the car was roaring, cars don't roar if they are in drive. It was an automatic. They roar if they are put into neutral and the engine roars at that speed. And the car engine was roaring and the car was found in neutral. I checked this out with Mercedes. Is it possible that at the point of impact that the car went from drive to neutral? They said it is physically impossible. The car was found in neutral. That means between leaving the roundabout to enter the tunnel until the point of impact, which is a matter of a few seconds, the impact with the 13th column, not the impact with the white Fiat. The engine was roaring. The car was in neutral. What obviously happened, it takes no genius to figure out, just rationality, common sense, and a dispassionate regard for the facts. And the facts will always lead you to the truth if you wish to engage your brain and use the grey cells that God gave you. The car enters the tunnel roaring, which means that Henri Paul put the car into neutral. Why would he have done that? He was a trained driver. He was trained because he was the head of security at the Ritz. He was trained in kidnapping, escape, etc., etc. He wasn't a dolt. And yes, he had had something to drink, but 90 seconds before he entered that car, he was on his haunches tying his shoelaces. That should be all the proof anybody needs that his faculties were not impaired. They couldn't have been catastrophically impaired within the next 3 to 5 minutes, which is the timeline we're speaking about, between that and death. It's a very short space of time between him tying his shoelaces on his haunches and dead. He enters the tunnel. He put the car into neutral because he had been taught that if the car is in neutral, it will follow a straight line. And he knew that he didn't know what he was dealing with, so he put the car in neutral. And that is the tragic mistake he made, because as the airbags deflated, and they deflate, because he obviously then saw what was happening, because he took evasive actions as the car entered the tunnel roaring at speed. The people, the North African couple in the car in front, had to speed up to avoid being rammed in their back by the Mercedes. And obviously, common sense tells you that at that point the airbags had deflated sufficiently for Henri Paul to realize that he was going to ram them. As he realizes this, they realizing it, speed up. But as they're speeding up, he takes evasive action and swings to the right. However, the car is still in neutral. And if a car is in neutral, you have no control over it. Only if it's in drive will you have control over it. That's the reality with automatic cars, sadly. And the rest is history. He swung out, lost control of the car, and died. Because within seconds, the girl in the car in front saw the accident. She saw them hit and Constantine across the road into the 13th column. And the car engine came into the car, crushing him and breaking his spine and Dodie's spine. She saw it. There's no mystery as to what happened. This is what happened. Where there is a mystery as to why this has never been acknowledged publicly. And the word in certain circles is because the automobile industry was terrified that if it were made public that it is possible for the airbags in a car to deploy with a little swipe as opposed to a real proper grinding crash, people would decide they didn't want airbags. And this was in the early days when they were trying to get airbags universally accepted. So I hope that answers the whole thing. Adam Farkas says, Dear Lady Colin, thanks once again for hitting the nail on the head in regards to Never Was. My question to you is, do you think that Diana, Princess of Wales, given all her issues, still did her duty to the country as the Princess of Wales, more so than Never Was, also known as Meghan? Thank you and regards to your sweet fur babies. Thank you, Adam Farkas. Oh, the comparison is between chalk and cheese. I mean, Diana did a lot of wonderful work for a lot of people. And Diana really did have a soft heart. She could be quite ruthless in some ways, but she really genuinely had a wonderful, soft, sweet side as well. There is no comparison between her and Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle, I think, did 72 engagements in the whole time she was here, some of which were pleasurable engagements. Meghan Markle was clearly out to play the system from the word go. Diana didn't. Diana genuinely did good work. I saw it myself. I was part of some of it. I mean, my first Diana book started out as a result of Diana and myself connecting at something the United Nations had, which was Peter Ripley, who is an old friend of mine, and I had sat on the United Nations Association committees that Peter organized since the 70s. And we were doing something called the Women of the World Awards that it was Peter's idea. And Diana heard about this. She saw a leaflet on somebody's table and said she wanted to be involved and became involved. That's how she met Mother Teresa as well. It was through Peter, because Mother Teresa was supposed to be receiving an award and was too ill, and so some of her nuns received the award on her behalf. And Diana asked to be involved and became involved. And indeed, that year, Diana presented the awards. And I then came up with the idea, because I used to do a lot of charity work, of 3 of my charities, 3 of her charities, which coincided with each other, that I would do a fundraising book for them based around her charity work, a biographical sketch of a fundraiser, really. And that was the start of my book, Diana in Private, The Princess Nobody Knows. And she's the one who helped to change it from a purely charitable enterprise into what she called her get out of jail card. So Diana certainly did sterling work, and she had done it over a period of years, because by then she had been married for 10 years. There's a heck of a difference between 10 years and well over 100 organizations that you're a patron of, and 72 attendances, including clearing out half of Wimbledon so that you and your friends can display their frowsy selves without being contaminated by the public. Or maybe because they didn't want the public getting a whiff of what she was really about, because maybe that was it. Maybe they weren't going to be contaminated by the public. Maybe the public were going to be contaminated by the stench emanating from her. That's a possibility, because I don't know why else you'd need to clear out 40 seats when they've never been cleared out for any other member of the royal family ever. But that goes to show the extent not only to which Meghan abused her position, but to which the royal family and everybody connected to them allowed her to indulge her supposed fears. And I'm such a delicate flower that I can't have people around me. Anyway, Stephanie Green says, Lady C, happy belated birthday. Many thanks. As we approach the anniversary of Diana's death, which is today now, could you recount your circumstances in the summer of 1997? What were you doing then, and how did you hear the news? I read your 1998 Diana biography and remember vividly your saying that you wept when you got the news. Are you relieved that you two made up before she died? Does that make the sadness easier to bear? Best wishes. Well, Stephanie Green, to be really blunt about it all, yes, I was sad because it was a genuine tragedy. A young woman with everything to live for dies in such a pointless way, leaving 2 young children. Of course it's a tragedy. Of course you are going to be sad. And because we had some personal interchange and connection, of course I was sad. And yes, I did weep a little bit for the loss, because it was a loss to the children. I mean, you'd have to be pretty hard-hearted not to have been moved. Ironically enough, the week before Diana died, everything I did, I was a guest of a friend on his boat, and everywhere we went the following week, which was the week of her death, Diana went. We left from the same airports, we went to the same places. It was just extraordinary. And I'm not saying that she shadowed me, because of course what we did and what she did was what everybody does. Perfectly conventional way of doing that whole area. And I was in bed when I got the news. My cousin is the one who phoned and told me. He woke me up. It must have been about 2 o'clock at night. And I was in the country for the weekend, down at the place I had in the country with the children and their nanny and a friend. And I got the news from my cousin Enrique to tell me that he'd heard that Diana was involved in a serious car crash. And then CNN phoned me. And in those days, I used to do CNN's royal stuff, as indeed I did People magazine's royal stuff, when Nina Biddle was their correspondent here. So it just goes to show how the world has changed, or to put it another way, how CNN and People have changed. And CNN phoned me, and they said to me, I don't think she was dead yet. So long ago. I think she was, but they expected her to die. And they asked me to speak. I said, I can't. I said, I'm in the country, the middle of the night. I'm not leaving my children to go into a studio. Forget it. They said, your voice will do. And I think I spoke for about 3 segments. Pretty much me, and I don't know what pictures there were or anything, but it was my voice. Then she died. That's right, it was before she died. Then she died, and I had to do more. And then I had to beetle into London to cut my holiday short. And then the world went mad, I have to tell you. It was just amazing. Basil, my therapist, who had done such wonders for me and who was truly a wonderful man and so wise and earthed. And Basil, when I spoke to him about the phenomenon, because it was a phenomenon of the reaction to Diana's death, he said that was what he found the most interesting thing about the whole episode, people's reaction to her death. And I thought it was, and I put this in my book, The Rare Diana. Some I got from Basil, and the rest I figured out for myself. It was a tribal bonding exercise. And because at the time rolling news was very new, it's now constant, but in those days rolling news was a rare rarity, and CNN had introduced it, and it kept the story alive, and by keeping it alive, it kept on sucking in more oxygen to feed the fire. And the more fiery it became, the more people went to the palace, and there was a tremendous outpouring of grief. But it was also tribal and national bonding, that people were a part of something, and they were expressing something very atavistic and very tribal. And this, of course, is a phenomenon that happens, for instance, or used to happen, when wars were declared. People would go to the palace and they would chair the monarch, and they would be all in favor of the war. And this happened on all sides of a conflict. So that the week between when Diana died and when she was buried was a nightmare for me, to answer the question what I did. And I forgot to say, in Costa Smeralda, I broke my toe while going down the stairs in the boat with my sandals on. I had on Jamaican leather sandals. Leather soles on boats are deadly, and I flew off into one of the masts and broke my big toe. So I couldn't walk properly. I mean, you couldn't have made this up. So if you look at the footage, whenever I'm being interviewed, I'm the only person always sitting down. Normally you walk onto the stage and you walk off. I couldn't, because I was hobbling. I was flown to Germany, I was flown to New York. I mean, but not only me, I mean, everybody who was even peripherally connected, as indeed I was, only peripherally connected, because I'd written down in private The Princess Nobody Knows, and it had been a New York and London Times, and indeed a worldwide bestseller. And so that's what I did. And I thought the whole thing was deeply regrettable. And what can I say? Kyle O'Brien says, Lady C, it seems we are always wondering what Diana, Princess of Wales, would have thought of her daughters-in-law, Catherine and Meghan, especially the latter in the last couple years. I'm going to stop you right there and say that I think Diana would have approved heartily of Catherine. I don't think they would have been necessarily that close. Diana was a very jealous and competitive woman. I think she would have had jealousy issues with any daughter-in-law, but I think she loved her children enough that she would have done her utmost to come to terms and accept where it was possible. I think she and Catherine would have got along and had a perfectly reasonably warm and supportive relationship. Of course, had she lived, William might not have found Catherine as appealing. Actually, I think he would have still. In fact, I take that back. I think he would have. Of all I've been told, I think he would have. Harry, I don't think Meghan would have stood a chance of getting within 50 paces of him, and had he done so and had they got together, I think she would have deplored Meghan. And I think she was not one to hold back, and she would have let her feelings be perfectly clearly known. So to continue the question, But you brought up in this last video that the Queen's own sister, Princess Margaret, would have bitten someone's head off for not correctly addressing her elder sister. What do you think Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret would have thought of our dear Megsy baby? Also, what her ex-husband, the Earl of Snowdon, might have thought as well. Seeing as the couple notably had high society friends who were famous in their own right, and not necessarily members of the aristocracy, do you think these two late members of the family would have been like Princess Anne and seen Meghan Markle coming a mile off? A mile? They'd have seen her coming a continent off. Princess Margaret deplored Diana and wouldn't speak to Diana. And I don't know if you noticed at Diana's funeral was pointedly erect while the Queen bowed her head. Not Princess Margaret. She absolutely loathed Diana with a passion, and which is ironic because in the early days she had been a great supporter of Diana. Tony Snowdon, well, he was a gentleman, louche, really rather nasty to women, but I don't think he would have been particularly understanding of Meghan's nonsense either. Meghan is too clearly an opportunist. She too clearly invents causes for complaint when there should be nothing but cause for celebration. Nobody in their right mind would ever, in my opinion, do anything but deplore this woman's conduct. "'Tis madness," says, most most fabulous Lady C. I'm very interested to know what you think Diana's life would be like today if she had lived. Would she still be the huge deal she was? Would she have married Dodie and been treated as a turncoat? Would she continue with the charities so dear to her, or would she have fled to Montecito? Would she have started wearing Meghan's favourite perfume? Oh, gosh. Oh, dear. It is madness for true. Oh, gosh. Thank you, my dear. You've brought such joy into my life. I just love it. Oh, I'm so anxious for your most knowledgeable view. Exclamation mark. Charming as well, 'tis madness. Charming as well. Well, Diana was on the way to being the Ziadie-Campbell of the royal family. So, had she lived and had her plans at the time of her death come to fruition, she would have married Dodie. Would they have been happy together? Diana was very needy, and I'm not sure, but she was a lot less needy by the time she died, but I'm not sure that Diana's neediness would ever have been curable, because Diana really, and when I say this, I am being sympathetic, Diana suffered from borderline personality problems, which are terrible, terrible problems to suffer from. They cause as much suffering for the person who has the condition as for the people involved with it, and it's not curable. However, with willingness, it is treatable, and the worst effects can be mitigated with treatment and the desire for improvement and with self-awareness. And Diana was on the path to healthier living and healthier relationships and healthier expectations. That doesn't mean that the underlying issue would ever have disappeared totally. If it didn't, which it couldn't, maybe somebody like Dodie would have been the sort of person with whom she would be able to have a long-standing relationship, because Dodie had nothing to do but love Diana. That was in some ways what she wanted. And to find somebody who's that incredibly loving and evidently very satisfactory in adult ways, shall we say, and very rich and able to give her a grand way of life, she, as Lady Diana Fayed, would have still remained a huge star. But she wouldn't have been quite as big a star or as brightly shining a star, let's put it that way, as she would have been had she remained Diana, Princess of Wales, and not married anybody else, or had she remained married to the Prince of Wales. I mean, position does have something to do with royal stardom, let's put it that way. She wouldn't have been treated as a turncoat for marrying Dodie. The royal family would have been exultant had somebody like Dodie taken her off their hands. She would also have been committing social suicide amongst some of her supporters by marrying Dodie. Jackie Kennedy did the same thing when she married Aristotle Onassis. It doesn't stop them from remaining famous, but it does take a little bit of the burnishing off the brightly shining patina. Yes, she would have continued with not all her charities. She had resigned from, I think, something like 100 charities in the mid-90s, and she limited her activities to a very few charities, and I think she would have reduced even further so that her main charity was her charity, which Mohammed Fayed was planning to back her in. And of course, this would have been wonderful for him and wonderful for her. And it would have been not only in worldly terms wonderful, but in charitable terms wonderful. And would she have fled to Montecito? Well, I don't think Julie Andrews' house is in Montecito, but that's where she was heading. So, do you begin to see the synchronicity and the parallels? And why this situation is a little bit more complex than the public has realized so far? As for wearing Meghan's favourite perfume, my dear, she would have been grateful, as indeed the rest of us are, to have had any connection whatsoever with Megsy Baby. If Megsy Baby had been lucky enough to get within a 500-mile radius of Harry while Diana was alive. Because Megsy Baby is so great and grand and so much better than everybody else that I'm sure Diana would have bent a knee in supplication to this wonderful, munificent, magnificent daughter-in-law that she had, and she was honoured to have. And if she felt to the contrary, I'm sure Megsy Baby would have told her and put her right. So, having hopefully answered the question, including the farcicality of certain aspects of the question, no offense intended, but it helps to keep things entertaining, doesn't it, Tis Madness? I know that's why you threw it in, and I get it. I love it. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for listening. If this has been of some interest to you, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, please keep the questions and comments coming in. This cannot be done without you. God bless and goodbye.